Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to talk Tampa Bay versus the Sarasota Greater Metro, a common comparison. But rather than do the normal pros and cons thing, I would like to seriously make the argument of how scale, suburban living, and infrastructure can dictate how you make any of these decisions, and arguably how a simple comparison like this in today's video can make everything else you do behind it, including buying the house, shopping new construction, more efficient and hopefully more pleasant as well. We have a lot of visuals. I'm going to be showing everything I'm saying the whole time we're doing this. I hope you enjoy. One thing I wanted to mention in the description box below, if you do like this video, I have a new home buyer guide to the state of Florida. A lot of like little extra things, density per metro breakdown of all the new construction communities in the entire state, a lifestyle first of go here, get this before you even shop neighborhoods, my favorite neighborhoods in every single major metro of the entire state, just stuff like that. Builder breakdowns of in these cost leaders, 55 and up, custom, semi-custom, what you're gonna come across of and why you should even care. Description box, there's a link. Without further ado, let's hop in. All right, so first things first, if you have found this video at the ideal timeline within the relocation cycle, then a lot of times people are calling and saying, I'm exclusively looking at the Gulf Coast, basically, and they're trying to work through these ideas. Well, when people mention the Gulf Coast, almost 100% of the time, they're not including the Florida Panhandle in that, which technically it is on the Gulf Coast. It's just really, in Florida, it's the Panhandle and then everything else, as far as functional day-to-day living. If you remove the Panhandle and you zoom in essence, it's Tampa Bay, Florida, down to Marco Island, then it falls off into the Everglades. The rest is on the Atlantic coast side. So what you're doing basically is you're not really coming in, if you were just kind of getting things going beginning, you're not coming in and realistically shopping 7, 8, 9, 10 cities versus each other, which is convoluted on its own outright, and trying to work through these things of all these names on a map. You're really just looking at 3 metros. You're comparing those 3 and saying what might be best for me and my family. Those 3 are Tampa Bay Greater, Sarasota Manatee Greater, and then Naples Fort Myers. This is a 7 to 8 county thing. And this is where it gets simpler and simpler as you go if you kind of start to whittle down things like this. I would argue amongst the 3, Sarasota Greater, Naples Fort Myers Greater are far more similar to each other than either one is similar to Tampa Bay. So if you have 2 mid-size-ish, depending on who you're asking, cities, metros, in Southwest Florida against 1 larger metro, you really don't want to take all 3 and just try to juxtapose all of them. You want to say, is there a better mid-size city to pick from so I can compare the 1 mid-size against the 1 large? I would argue that Sarasota would be a better mousetrap to contextualize than Naples would be in just a broad comparison's sake. Arguably, Naples Fort Myers has more incremental value if you know a lot more about Sarasota than trying to solve all of this at one time. It's just a vast area if you do it like that. So it gets more interesting, and hence the topic of today's conversation. Because what I'm doing is trying to almost meet you where you are in the way that the majority of people I've found have been navigating this journey versus like a pros and cons or a rankings list, which if you're this close to a purchasing decision, the chance that you're comparing Sarasota versus Tampa Bay at all is going to be a lot less common than if you're up here and you're just kind of saying like, what does all this mean? Number one, what Tampa really is to this side of the state is it's the go one place and get most of what you would need or want for most people. It's that city. It's a big city doing big city stuff, but it's so coastal that the infrastructure creates and satiates a lot of people's needs at one time. You know, this is going to be a place that has multiple different ways to live, depending on what you're looking for at the time. So you can really like evolve even that choice as you go. You know, you can start one place and end up in different. And so I like that value a lot. And even the way the town's separated, that it kind of clusters in separate areas, but it's separated in almost like districts, right? So like the main part of Tampa and every way you think of it, the majority of the action is basically 4 exits on the interstate, right? So it's over in this area, airport's over here, but you're like exit 39 to 44, you have the major downtown, which is very much like a work first, play second area. You have a whole entire river district there's restaurants galore. The Tampa Bay Bucks are in that area, a major NFL team. The Tampa Bay Lightning and the hockey team, spring training everywhere. Because of these large venues, you get the first of the major concerts, stand-up comedy, there's festivals. It's all the big city stuff. But it's not just that, right? Because like all this water, right? So you have Bay Living and all that kind of thing. But then that's one county. The other county is the coastal county. And it feels that different. You know, the downtown's on the Bay, the beaches are over here. Downtown St. Pete is a lot less of that like corporate hustle bustle feel than the Tampa kind of prep districts would be. It's eclectic, pet friendly. There's a pier with all kinds of stuff going on. It's just a completely different vibe. And these are just right here to each other, right? So like a lot of times people will choose, I'm either this or I'm that. Like this is historic housing. This is different, right? But it's not because you lose access to the others. There's a military culture here. Beaches are just a whole different animal. And then, you know, suburbs, there's not one, there's three, just because the infrastructure provides it. There are pockets of where, if you love old Florida like St. Augustine, you can live in versions of that in Tampa. And it's just about all these people being able to come to one place, whether it's for school, it's for work, or whatever it may be, but then they can still not lose out on all the other things that kind of make Florida special at one time. You have to be a large enough city to provide that. Thing on top of that I really like, it's not the biggest city in the world. So I don't think it's going to feel like mini Manhattan like Miami does in a lot of ways. So you get the goods of it being bigger, but it's balanced. Sarasota, on the other hand, it's not that. It is, if you needed to be in Tampa for those reasons, and you could choose to not be because you don't have to be, Sarasota wins that argument. It's play first, work second. It's much smaller. The downtown is not a place that you get up, run in to work at. It's art galleries and restaurants. It's walkable. It's clean. It does not look industrious. It's very coastal. And the way I would frame these two up is just like I talk about new construction a lot of times, is I love that multiple people can get in a similar area, but don't have to live in the exact same house or the exact same neighborhood to enjoy the communal benefits of that area. Southwest Florida is an area you can look at as a whole like that. And that's why I would use Sarasota as an example over Naples, because it's in the middle. So myself included, like I'm independent. So if you could say, you know, I lived in Tampa for 11 years and drove from northern Tampa into the district for finance and did all the hour commute each way, all the stuff. I mean, lived in St. Pete, all those things. I've done all those lives. But when I didn't need to anymore, you have to consider like, okay, there's a lot of more people than not that are either from there or just need to be there, right? It's a work tie. It's a physical functional tie. If you don't have that anymore, do you want to deal with all the negatives that come with that, as far as like a never-ending commute? There's more cars, there's more traffic, there's accidents, there's just more stuff going on. Sarasota is kind of a breath of fresh air in that respect, if that was your perspective before, if that makes sense. But what I like on top of that is the cool thing is, again, like all the value that I find value in is that nothing's perfect, right? So isn't it easier to say 1 plus this, a little bit of a weighted formula, maybe how much you think different things are important? But to not lose the big city and gain Sarasota, you could say the combination of the two is more value than either one could be by themselves. You could sit in northern Sarasota, use Tampa's airport, not Sarasota's, in 60 miles. All of those sporting events, all those kind of things are right here. They're lower. So you could say, you know, for the night, I'm going to go up there. For this one thing, I'm going to go up there, but I don't have to always be in the thick of it. Or you could have the opposite opinion, start up, go down. That's one thing I really, really like. Okay, a second thing that is really, really crucial to look at in my opinion, but it's very hard to see on the surface, is suburban living. A lot of relocations end up in the suburbs. One, because that's how a lot of people live outside the state of Florida. Most people aren't just like moving to beach houses and these kind of things like the maybe stereotype might be. It's really suburban. And because of it's suburban, a lot of times it's new construction. There's a lot of advantages, not only to like what you get, but it's the logistics of moving across the country is not fun. If you've ever done it, or you're trying to do it right now, there's a lot of things to consider. And if you can control timeline, liquidity, debt to income ratio, ease, you can visit for 4 days and make meaningful sense of the town. There's a lot of perks to the suburbs. Now, these towns live extremely different when it comes to the suburbs. I have not seen as much. One of these points I'm making, especially the suburban one, being the deal breaker for people, because if you need to be in Tampa and you're like, I like Lakewood Ranch better or something like that, typically isn't going to make you change the entire town because you physically can't. But it's important nonetheless. So let's start again with Tampa. The way Tampa suburbs exist is don't count any of this. All of St. Pete, for the most part, with shades of gray, almost non-existent new construction, regardless of what the internet says. And most people, if you're Googling best place to live in St. Petersburg, Florida, or anything of the sort, they actually live on the bay side, not the Gulf side. And they live in the historic bungalow districts above downtown St. Pete. They're lovely. I lived in there for a long time. My sister's over there. But it's northeast St. Pete. So there's a neighborhood called Old Northeast, I lived in a neighborhood called Woodlawn. There is St. Paul Euclid, historic Kenwood. They're all very close to this area. There's another great area called Crescent Lake. Some niche areas like Snell Isle and Shore Acres hug this. And then you come down to downtown St. Pete. You're mainly staying north of it. And then the beaches are just a different thing. But again, the narrowness of these areas provide a lot of opportunity because this doesn't take 50 minutes to get across, right? So you can gain without losing a ton, but the big choice is, do I be on the Tampa side or the St. Pete side? That's the big choice. Everything changes this bridge right here or this bridge right here. So don't count suburbs at all in a traditional sense. That's 1950s, 1940s bungalow front porch living. That's for you or it is not. This is old Florida kind of like coastal living. I wouldn't count that as suburban either. It's three main areas that you could go if you're looking online. The first is, and probably the most old school, is to go east. So if all the working districts and all the actions here, because you got South Tampa, like Hyde Park, South Tampa, North Hyde Park, all that area. You have Ybor City, that's like the old rolling district, real eclectic, kind of, it's getting cooler. West Tampa, you have like the mall, you have the International Mall, the airport. So a lot of the work exists right here for all those reasons. So if you said, well, you know, if you get close to the city, right, it's city kind of stuff. Even if the houses are nice or they're newer or whatever, they're all jammed into these boroughs, street to street, you know, they're old. That's how any city is. Well, if you go east of it historically, this area, this direction right here, was one of the easiest districts to go home, live in the suburbs, have more space, have suburban housing, maybe a gated neighborhood, something like that, and then get into town. Because a lot of like one or both people and parents are commuting a lot of time to this district I'm mentioning right here. So Brandon, Progress Village, Riverview, a lot of it exists there. And then if you stretch, like say, I can go further, save, get something different, get more space for less, that kind of thing. It's just the idea of getting further. So if the whole value is to get kind of close to the district, then what would make you save money is get further from it, right? Because you get in this area, you're not closer to St. Pete, but you're further from that. So you should gain something. It should be priced, bigger house, newer or something. That's where you can get into Apollo Beach, take that on steroids. That's where you get into Ruskin, Sun City Center, Wilmama. And, you know, and then simple economics from there. If the best house in the world could be closer to town, wouldn't you choose it? That's one. The other easiest one to explain would be to go west. The benefit of going west, and there's the major area that people are doing is like this area right here, West Chase, maybe Oldsmar Town and Country. You could go a little bit northern. There's like Carrollwood, Citrus Park, this kind of area too. Why would you go west versus east? Beyond like maybe an individual neighborhood or schools or something like that, is west gets you on the way to the beaches without being in Pinellas County. So east gets you no benefit to beach proximity, it gets you the opposite within Tampa. So it starts to get significant distance. Now, you might gain a much more abundance of new construction or master plan or something like that because east has land, west does not. But if you go west and you can figure it out, like West Chase is a great example. It was a master plan. It's not that old. Your northernmost tip of Barrier Islands in Tampa Bay stops right here. These are all coastal, but they're not beaches. Like Tarpon Springs doesn't have a beach. Neither does Dunedin, none of these. It's Clearwater and up to Kalidisi Island and Honeymoon Island. So if you want to get the closest beach to your area, you're going in this direction. You get very far north, it starts to get weird. And then you need bridge access, right? So if you're West Chase here, how do you get to the beach? You don't want it to take forever to get to here. But if you can end up in the perfect spot, like an Oldsmar, this one, you might be an exact equal distance with shades of gray to a Barrier Island and to the major downtown working districts, 20 minutes either way, and a suburban house. Pretty interesting, but also more scarce. The belle of the ball in the suburban conversation is north. North is where they had the most land to do stuff. It's the newest, it's the most innovative, like the land arrangements allowed them to go more master plan where it's not individual new construction communities in silos. And basically it starts right above the University of South Florida. The main campus is in Temple Terrace area. So if you're here, you're going all the way up here and you're saying, okay, I'm gonna drive 25 miles north for what? And it's basically all of suburbia. So it started with Tampa Palms. The main one you'll probably see these days is called Wesley Chapel. So Tampa Palms, Wesley Chapel, Lando Lakes, Lutz, which you see here. Wesley Chapel you see is up here. And then Zephyr Hills is above that. But this kind of corridor lives very similar where you might not, when you drive from Wesley Chapel through Lando Lakes, like you might not feel it right away. So this kind of lives pretty cohesively. But this is like Pleasantville suburbia. It's a ton of communities with multiple neighborhoods within them. Schools, churches, kids' sporting events. It feels very insular, very similar demographics it feels like. And your whole thing is just, why do you get all that? It's because the minimum drive into town, if you commute every day, which I did for a very long time, 25 miles does not take 25 minutes. They're getting a lot more industry up there, but if you don't happen to work at one of those places. And so that's kind of how you evolve the value of that. But it's a lengthy conversation, right? Because if you come into Tampa randomly and you're looking on Zillow, for instance, I mean, where you're going to end up is like so scattered. So really you want to section the towns and then search within the towns after you've already said that works for me. But that is why they would stand out versus each other, basically. Now, Sarasota is so much smaller that it's easier. So basically everybody in Sarasota, the thing is we don't have 5 different parts of town that people deem valuable. Like I just mentioned in Tampa, you have like sports over here, the beaches over here, downtown St. Pete, you might like better than downtown Tampa, but downtown Tampa doesn't have the beaches. The ease in saying that everyone agrees that the same value in Sarasota is in one area makes like everything else just how far are you from that area and which direction did you go? So Sarasota being so much thinner, like you're not talking all of this, you're talking like this right here. Downtown Sarasota is in this area. Like John Ringling, all that like original reason Sarasota got popular was this one area. And what it did was basically they developed all this and then they bled out. So like if you get over to downtown, look how coastal it is. So 3.5 miles to your closest beach, which is Oki. The bays in between, so now you got bay to beach, bay to Gulf, basically. And then Siesta Key's right below it as well, 6 miles below Lido Key. So if you take this, I call the magical triangle, because of the 3 points. But if you take this right here, you go west, you could argue you get everything. There's other versions of this. But if you could choose this every time, would you? The downtown is lovely, 100 plus like kind of bougie beach shopping village here, St. Armand Circle. Siesta Key's main beach, because there's 3 beaches on Siesta Key Island. Main beach is on the north part of the island as well. Ski Village, the main tourist shopping districts there as well. So you have all the cosmopolitan shopping districts, top 10 beaches in the world in a lot of people's eyes. Quartz white sand, doesn't get hot to the touch, like unbelievable. Bay in between. And then this little strip right here is the last, it's called west of the trail because this US 41 right here, this street, it's like a coastal interstate basically. It's called Tamiami Trail. So if you're west of the trail, that's valuable because it is the closest you can get to the water without being on the barrier islands, because the barrier islands are a real commitment. You're there, you're there. But if you get as close as you can get to it, there's no HOAs, single family homes, there's land. And again, I'm big on the access thing. Just because you come to Florida and you jam and you're like, there's so much water, I'm gonna be good. But not if you're in no man's land, you know? If you're like up here, you can't get to the beaches. You gotta come down and cross, unless you're boating or something. So it's cool, but it's less valuable. If you're here, Southern Bridge, Northern Bridge, got all of it. Because that is true, everything else is just how far did I get from it? Most of Sarasota is already suburban because the downtown's so small. What everyone does, almost 100% these days, is they hug this interstate line right here in a town that is so narrow. It is very, very, very hard to get more than 20 miles to everything. Most people are 8 to 12. And then it's just which direction you go. Suburban Living in Sarasota is almost the whole interstate line. But the big difference of these 2 towns as you go up and down, because you're basically going, a lot of people in the suburbs live northeast, you have the middle, still on the same line. And then you see it's kind of interesting as you go south, you actually get closer to the water because of the shape of the state. And then you have this version here too. Depending on how far you go down and up, you might hit another downtown, like there's another downtown here. There's beaches all along the way. So the simplicity of just being like, I kind of can have suburbs, beach, land in between, no matter where I go in the town, it's a lot easier to search. The weird thing about these 2, if someone like put your back against the wall and we're like, which one of these would have more new construction communities? Obviously like the big suburbs gonna have like all the stuff. On paper, that's what it looks like, but that's not the way it shops. So we created this little map here that takes, so if you go to newhomesource.com right now, it'd be kind of hard to get to this version of what I made, but it's a little under 1,500 actively building currently new home communities in the entire state. And then you said, okay, where are they at? The weird thing is for a metro so small, 36.6% of the entire state's density is in Southwest Florida versus the other, right? Significant, because Central Florida is huge compared to, Sarasota and these kind of areas. We have 36%. So you already know there's a ton, and you go like, where are they all at? You look at Tampa, St. Pete, 197. That makes sense, right? There's more. Sarasota, Bradenton seems like that's a lot for a metro that small. And then it starts to whittle. If there's only 62, when you go to actually shop them, it doesn't feel like 62 at all, right? Because not only your housing criteria is different, but like they're not consolidated. The internet makes it look like there's so much more. When you start to functionally shop them, like it dries up really quick. So you're really just these 2 conversations, but then you go to New Home Source. This is what it actually looks like. And this is how fun it is to shop. Hence why I'm doing these videos. Tampa looks like it has 1 billion, But like, look how big this metro is. Look how spread they are out. And they're only in those areas I mentioned. Like this right here is all kind of nonsense. All these new construction, these are a lot of one-offs like call for price, urban infill like knockdown, like custom builders doing some interesting things. Maybe you catch new construction over here every once in a while. As you zoom in a little further, you see what I'm saying about Westie Chapel and all that stuff starts to cluster and you're kind of going through. A lot of times it's one neighborhood listed a bunch of different times on a dot with different builders within the neighborhood. So it's not actually communities, nothing in between. And then a lot of this is not that real. And then the rest is over here, but it's really spread out because there's nothing really to grab onto. And it's very transient, very fleeting. And so what you end up doing is you end up staying up here or immediately going down to here and you borderline start to be in the Sarasota market already. Because I would argue this area is more of a suburb of Sarasota than it is a southern suburb of Tampa Bay. The difference about Sarasota, with all of that being said, is that it looks spread out as well. But when you go to actually shop this area, we're mainly divided into 3 major master plan areas that have meaning. And then you go in and you look at the neighborhoods. The things are not in a vacuum like those other areas. They are master planned. It is much more intentional. So what we're doing basically here, I'll hop back to the bigger map, is you're saying that, okay, you got 197 communities or whatever. So there is one master plan suburb here, but of those 190-ish neighborhoods, right, maybe less than 150 are like real things you would do today. We have 2 of the fastest growing master plan communities in the United States. This is one area you go to get 50 neighborhoods, but it's a concept and you can shop it like a concept. They have websites like the Chamber of Commerce kind of situation. So it's basically just deciding, do I want to go northeast of town? Do I want to be parallel to it? Or do I want to be south of it? There are negatives and positives to all of them as you cascade, but way easier to decide because you're trying to get close to the same thing. What most people do these days, or in general, if they've gone northeast, they said, if I go 9 to 20 miles one way, because it's this angle right here, that's why it gets further, northeast of the major stuff, then I hit Lakewood Ranch, Florida. Lakewood Ranch, Florida is the #1 multi-generational master plan community that exists. It goes all the way from here, which is the lower part, up to here. All these neighborhoods, basically owned by one family of the land. The oldest house in the entire thing was built in 1995. So it's so new, the streets make sense, it just makes sense. And it's not like a Westie Chapel, Florida, it's pockets of master plan that gets a little bit interesting. But Lakewood Ranch, imagine if you knew what you were gonna do for 30 years in advance, you would do it totally different. It's holistic is the best way to say it. And I think over half of them are still actively building. So by doing that, you dive in and it's got everything, right? Every price point, everything, right? And then what people typically do, if that doesn't kind of work out, they'll say, all right, well, the median price point here is $680. So, how do I replicate it a little bit? It's really about staying in the same direction and going further and getting more. Parish is a great example of that. Median's 410K. Most of the Parish neighborhoods are sisters of the Lakewood Ranch neighborhoods. And you're saying that I'm further from what everybody says is important because it's down here, and I'm gonna save money because of that. Simple as that. The other one is the polar opposite of this is to, like, you have this one ping. What most other people do is they shop that against the southern version, basically the southern version of this area. Venice, Englewood falls off into the water, you hit Cape Coral. To actually go to Fort Myers, you go east and down. So it's basically nothing below it. So you're going down here because this is typically gonna say, if Sarasota up there is really what's important, up here, what everybody said, then if I go here, then it's the junior version of that. It's still coastal, but it's the junior version of that. So inherently, people are going left, I'm going right. This might be a little bit more laid back. It might be a little bit more affordable in perspective because not everybody chose to do this area. So it gave me an option. It's extremely coastal and it's more boutique. So what they did is they added a master plan area down here because typically coastal proximity and master plan new construction does not come synonymous. So that's always a sacrifice. If they can make it happen, like Nocatee in the Jacksonville area or something like this, then it kind of gives you a new construction house in a coastal environment, which is rare. They built one that's really cool. It's called Welland Park. It sits right here. It's 18 minutes from 4 separate beaches, a lot of different communities, but you're talking 10, 12, 13 total neighborhoods versus 50. So if you don't want all that, you can come down for this. Changes the general town you're in, but it's going to give you, just like St. Pete versus Tampa, if you love Lakewood Ranch and you're a Venice person, you probably won't love Lakewood Ranch. You would choose one. So it's binary, which I love. And then it's everybody else. It's like, okay, the cool thing here is Sarasota just cuts through the middle in saying that if I came to town, I shopped those 2 districts, one's here and one's here. So what if both of those are like, I don't know, I kind of want to be in the middle of stuff. Everybody else goes in the middle. And so the most interesting thing that's happening now, it's not as master planned, but it's enough of a presence, is right here. So people are going parallel to Siesta Key, and the lower Siesta Key bridge is here, Stickney Point. And they're kind of building out here. This is as far as it looks on a map because of all the green space. It's really like 12 miles one way to the beach. So they're really building out all of this behind a mature suburb that already existed called Palmer Ranch. And the only reason you would do that versus those other two, because those other two will blow you away in every other way that this can't, because these are single neighborhoods, even if they're large, is it puts you in a location that those other two cannot be in yet. And then in 15 years with High Hat and 3H Ranch, we're going to have another version of that. And then it's everything else, everything else that's not suburban or offshoots of that. And if you understood those three concepts, you'd only, just stretch them or trickle out to save money or get a bigger house or something like that. So I would say the summary of all of that long manifesto would be that for the most part, if that was valuable at all, it's because you've like maybe chosen Tampa and you're like, I just don't even know where to start. I don't know where to begin with that. You zoom out. If you look at what different new construction builders or something like that are doing in different parts of these towns, and you understand what that town means, like what is Wesley Chapel north of Tampa as a value to the town? You can't get in here, but it took you driving all the way out there in order to obtain it. What is Lakewood Ranch to Sarasota in a similar context? Then if you look at the pricing against each other in these different areas, you'll see that Tampa Bay is grossly more affordable than anything you're going to find in the Sarasota-Manatee County area in perspective. But I've said this whole video that Sarasota-Manatee is easier. If you were setting out to do a new investment strategy and you had to kind of pick one, wouldn't you go after the absolute for sure thing if you're not like a risk taker? That's what it is. The more ambiguity that exists in the Tampa Bay market creates the more opportunity, but the less chance of appreciation. Because not everybody's going to agree with you in what you like. In Sarasota, most people, it'd be hard for them to argue against what everybody should like. And so I think you can basically work these towns, take advantage of these towns, and get what you need and want from theoretical conversations like these. And my last point for this video, I really was planning on just focusing on infrastructure because I just like what geography dictates. I think I went so hard on the previous section that I covered a lot of those bases. But the one thing you could look at is just the old school dynamic of how things are built. I think the narrowness of a state, the way the interstates run, it dictates how the whole town lives day to day. All your headaches are going to come from the same stuff. And being really thoughtful when you come to town, one of the best things I like to do is to really overload context before you ever visit and not use the visit for like straight discovery because it feels fun, but useful wise, it's tricky. And then when you get to town, imagine if you kind of have all these trigger points in your head and you spent town really thinking about like driving from one thing to another, like really trying to, because the one thing is like, we all know when you visit an area that you're going to move to, like versus being in that neighborhood again, when you actually move there for like months, there's no way to get a good gauge of what it's going to be like. You just know, you can drive it at night, in the morning, and like, but you're never going to really know how it feels. So I like to spend a lot of my time on that, really being thoughtful about what the miles mean to the town at different times and stuff like that. But I'm not going to go too crazy there. The one thing I would really say that from my experience of working with enough people is typically everybody's going to start a one domino one of two ways. You should never really be looking at the house or anything like that. It's going to be more confusing than anything. What they're going to start with is straight lifestyle is like, what are you trying to do? Well, I'm looking for something a little bit more laid back. Ideally, like to not be exactly where all the tourists are. I still want a new construction house though. And you're kind of saying, where are all the areas within the region, in this case, Southwest Gulf Coast, that you can do that in? And it makes things really small fast. And then if you came to town and you looked at those versus each other, it would solve all the things that I kind of like over-planted in your head already. It would solve them quicker. If you were saying something like that to me, I would say new construction, you have to say shades of gray though with new construction because coastal proximity again. But if you're looking for like old Florida and that kind of feel, and most people aren't like, I'm going to live on the beach to do that, like the tip of Anna Maria Island, then I would say Venice, Florida is a really, really interesting one, this kind of area. That's what that is to that town, like I mentioned. If you did the Naples-Fort Myers version of that, really, I'd be messing around with this area, like Bonita Springs, because the main Naples is down here. That's the 1% of the 1%. You start creeping in here. It gets you a little bit more docile, a little bit more family-friendly. Estero might get you too far east to be meaningful as far as coastal proximity. And then you could say, like, in Tampa, it would be really interesting to look at, like, Dunedin Safety Harbor. Dunedin is the Gulf version of what Safety Harbor is to the Bay version over here. But if you took just those simple examples of those three different areas, while doing that, you would immediately probably, you might narrow to one metro immediately. You're trying to look at the city, but trying to get to Dunedin, even the way you went from one to the other, and maybe the order in which you did what I just suggested, would solve a lot for you. And you probably should spend like 4 hours doing that before you looked at anything else. The other thing, which is much more functional that you might be doing, especially if you're looking in the Tampa area, is like, I'm moving here for this. My grandkids are here, my job's here, whatever. So you're really saying like circling a map around that. And then it's how much do different things matter in that formulaic experiment. Like me, for instance, when I had an 8-month-old son, I built a house in Wesley Chapel and I just ate that drive every day. It wore me down eventually, 3 years in, but I wanted what I was able to do when I came home. And so that outweighed it, and I did it the rest of my life when I got home from work there. You might feel differently about that. And that's going to then change what you do, right? Like if you're working in, I don't know, South Tampa, somewhere in here. Well, maybe your budget's $700,000 or something like that. You really try to hug, I'd be trying to hug this area. I'd be looking at Beach Park. You can't stay around here at all. It's very expensive. And you start to creep, but you can't creep to the other areas I would have suggested, right? So you might end up in like Carrollwood, Northdale, but you see what I'm kind of getting at. And it's just basically, I would really recommend taking that order, getting context for how to identify stuff. The identification should stay at a macro level so that you can feel the difference between these two physically. And then the house thing becomes like, there's always 10 more options in an area than you're aware of if you're at the timeline where it makes sense to share. And I think things are much more valuable. They're much easier to remember in that respect. And I know, at least for myself, our organization is much more valuable under the guise of a larger geography play. So that's mainly how I would compare these against each other. All right, my friends, that is a wrap for today's video. I hope you enjoyed my take. If you did, please consider subscribing to our channel, The Florida Relocation Guide here. Just the best way to see what's coming next. Most Sundays and Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern. A lot of great stuff planned for the balance of 25, going into 26. Including like what we think is going to happen there. Subscribing is just the best way to get informed about all that stuff. I mentioned a new home buyer guide in the introduction to this video. It's in the description box below. A lot of cool perks. It's a nice flip book. You can download this as a PDF as well. Check that out. Another thing that we do that I think arguably is one of the most helpful things is email report, much more than a newsletter, but it's now every 14 days. We're doing it twice a month and includes a bunch of different things. One, more bite-sized consumable content, but the idea is it's incremental. It's not just a recap of our videos or a shorter version of what I'm already saying all the time. It allows us to add a real-time element. We're doing not only insight, but we're going to have the best quick move-in homes in the most important new construction builders every 14 days. We're going to have the most attractive incentives and discounts every 14 days. One of the things I would say is the most important thing you could do if you're shopping, or one of the first questions that's going to arise, if you like one thing, you're going to say, what else should I be looking at? Or what else should I look at all before I make a decision? So you need a comparison. You need this one community also as compared against these 3 others. And so we're gonna do a lot of that kind of stuff of just this or that. So I think it's gonna be hopefully a really helpful resource that we can continue to add to over time. And we don't spam you at all other than those 2 emails. So sign up for that. Separate sign up is in that description. You might already be on it, or if you download anything, you'll get it. So just food for thought there. And then lastly, I have a new channel I launched. It's called New Home Geek. New Home Geek is the exact thing on YouTube if you can find it, but it looks like that. And that's going to be another 2 to 3 videos a week on a separate channel that just allows me to do stuff I can't do on the main one, right? I don't want to post 50 videos to you guys and exhaust you on this one, but this will allow me to go narrow. I'm going to do deep breakdowns on the closest new construction community to schools, boutique urban infill builders that where you could be closer to town, and just really dive into them deeply without having to feel like I'm watering down this content here. So check that out, another incremental play there. And I think that wraps it. Thank you guys so much. My name's Adam Hancock, if we have not met. And if we can assist you in the Southwest Florida market at all, please consider reaching out. Fantastic brokerage, very boutique, very much a baton handoff from the content we do here. It's not separate than that. It's not salesy. It is relocation, new construction focused, but a full service residential brokerage. Thank you guys. See you in the next one.